Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Hi, everyone, and welcome on in to episode 2 of Eagles Memories, part of the brand new Pin Pull Network. I'm your host, John Stolnis from BleedingGreenNation.com. Of course, a lot of you, if this is your first time hearing me on the Pin Pull Network, you might recognize my voice from the Eye on the Enemy podcasts, formerly with the Bleeding Green Nation podcast feed. Of course, that podcast feed is no more, but as you are all well aware of that, if you listen to on the Shane page with Shane Half and Johnny Page, they've picked up their stakes and started the Pin Pull Network, and I am happy to be here with them as we continue to build this network and provide to you what I think is eventually going to be the best Eagles podcast network in recorded human history. But we got a long way to go to measure up to what we had over there at BGN Radio. But this, I do feel like, is going to be a good replacement for those of you who have been missing BGN Radio. You've got all of the film work that Shane and Johnny do. You've got the other great podcast we are lining up for you here. Eye on the Enemy is going to get ramped up as we get closer to training camp. But for the next few weeks, we're going to focus on some Eagles memories, and we're going to be continuing our look back at the 2004 Eagles season. It is, of course, 20 years since one of my favorite all-time Eagles seasons. It didn't end in a Super Bowl victory, but it was the single most dominant Eagles team I had ever seen up to that point. If you missed episode 1 of Eagles Memories, which came out last week, we took a look at how the Philadelphia Eagles acquired Terrell Owens. It was called the Summer of T.O., and it was certainly filled with drama, as everything with T.O. generally is. So I would encourage you guys to listen to episode 1 before you listen to episode 2 here. But on this episode, we're going to take a look at the first quarter of the 2004 Eagles season. We're going to go through games 1 through 4. Of course, we're actually going to start off in the preseason, because even in the preseason in 2004, there was juice. There was lots of juice everywhere in 2004, especially with Terrell Owens here. Now, for those of you not of this generation, one of the reasons that we're going to talk about a preseason game is because there was a time not so long ago in NFL history when starters actually played in the preseason. And in games 2 and 3 of the preseason, they played a lot. Game 3 of the preseason, they played 3 quarters most of the time. It was seen as a dress rehearsal, a needed dress rehearsal for the regular season. Of course, now we are more scared and concerned about players injuring themselves because we've seen big name players get lost for the season with injuries in games that don't count. But back in 2004, Terrell Owens, one of the most highly anticipated games of that season, didn't even count in the standings. I know, right? You're shocked and you're surprised, but that's the way it went. So we're going to start off with the Eagles' second preseason game of the 2004 season against the very same Baltimore Ravens that Terrell Owens eschewed during the course of the summer. If you listen to episode 1, of course, you remember that the Ravens and the 49ers had a trade all worked out to acquire Terrell Owens, but T.O. wanted to play in Philadelphia. He told Baltimore he wouldn't go play with them. He didn't like their quarterback situation. Kyle Bowler was their starting quarterback at the time, so kind of hard to argue with the fact that T.O. didn't want to go play with Kyle Bowler, although the Baltimore Ravens were a great team in 2004. But that all got blown up when a special mediator entered the picture and was ready to make Terrell Owens a free agent. And so Baltimore fans, a lot of the team was spurned by T.O., took it personally and used it as motivation. And then normally the Eagles play the Ravens in the preseason. And of course, 2004 was no different. T.O.'s debut in an Eagles uniform comes against the very team that he had said that he did not want to play for. So a lot was building up, even for this preseason game. in an insanely hyped up Lincoln Financial Field crowd in what was the most highly anticipated preseason game in franchise history, and it probably still is. Leading up to the game, Ravens Hall of Fame linebacker Ray Lewis warned Owens that he better not go across the middle. And then Owens responded that Lewis isn't even the hardest hitter in the NFL. I mean, these guys were throwing haymakers at each other, guys. It's so, it's kind of funny when you look back on it 20 years later and you hear grown-ups talking like this. It seems so childish, right? You didn't even come play for us. You better not come over the middle. Oh, yeah? Well, you don't even really hit all that hard. You know what I mean? Like, it's so dumb. But we got into it. We get fired up for it, and we eat that stuff up. We really do. There's a reason why it works. So we got it all built up in their heads. I mean, I remember the lead up going into that game. We were salivating for the Baltimore Ravens, and we wanted Ray Lewis in Lincoln Financial Field. I mean, this was a fake game. It was a game that didn't count. And yet everybody's getting all worked up. You better not come over the middle. Okay. Like, just in the preseason, nobody hits. Even back in 2004, everybody was kind of pulling up a little bit. So everyone wondered, how would the Eagles respond? What kind of statement would T.O. make? And we didn't have to wait long in this game to find out, because on the first play that the Eagles ran on offense, McNabb and Owens showed America on a nationally televised game on CBS what was to come that season.
Terrell Owens, everybody, all eyes, all attention on T.O. and how this will all work out.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised to see the first play if they don't try to get the football to Terrell Owens.
He looks his way, fires it his way. There's Owens at the 45, inside the 20, and on the first play at Philadelphia in an Eagle uniform, Terrell Owens takes it 81 yards right on the jersey number.
That 81-yard touchdown electrified the crowd in a 26-17 victory that didn't actually mean anything. But Owens and Lewis played the first half only. Their paths never crossed during the game, so Owens did not worry about getting hit over the middle, and these two guys didn't have to worry about hitting each other or knocking into each other or anything like that. Owens just had the one catch, but it did set the tone for the start of the regular season a few weeks later. Now, as we enter the 2004 season, there were more players on this team other than just Terrell Owens. That may surprise you to find that out, but to that point, this was, I believe, the best roster ever assembled in Eagles history, and it is one of the best rosters in Eagles history. Is it better than the 2017 roster that won it all? It might be, top to bottom, and it might be better than the 2022 roster. It's close. It's close. This 2004 roster was absolutely loaded. During the offseason, the Eagles, in addition to signing Terrell Owens, they signed defensive end Javon Curse to an 8-year, $65 million contract with $16 million guaranteed. They also inked linebacker Dhani Jones, remember him? And quarterback Jeff Blake was the backup quarterback in 2004. I bet you didn't know that. That's a good trivia question. No, actually, he was the number 3. I forgot. Coy Detmer was the backup quarterback. Jeff Blake was the number 3 quarterback. Never mind. That's not a good trivia question. We would have gotten it wrong. The Eagles also acquired Owens in the trade with the 49ers, and then they brought back defensive end Hugh Douglas, as well as middle linebacker Jeremiah Trotter after they were released by their previous teams. The Eagles lost guard John Welborn in a trade to the Kansas City Chiefs. They traded A.J. Feely. They traded A.J. Feely to the Miami Dolphins, and they traded Brandon Whiting to the 49ers in the Terrell Owens deal. And they traded wide receiver James Thrash to the Washington, at the time, Redskins. And in free agency, the Eagles lost linebacker Carlos Emmons, cornerbacks Troy Vincent and Bobby Taylor, who were on the downslides of their careers at that point. Running back Deuce Staley, who was a big part of the teams from 2000 to 2003. He left in free agency. Defensive end Marco Coleman and guard Bobby Williams. So your starting roster In 2004, Donovan McNabb with Coy Detmer the backup and Jeff Blake your number 3. Your running backs were Brian Westbrook. He for the first time in his career, the feature back after Carell Buckhalter was lost in that same game against the Baltimore Ravens, that preseason game. Carell Buckhalter injured his knee and was lost for the season, so the job became Brian Westbrook's all to himself. Dorsey Levens was the backup running back, and he did get a fair number of carries in 2004. Josh Parry and John Ritchie were the other running backs. Ritchie, the starting fullback. This is during a time in the NFL when teams actually used fullbacks. The wide receivers were Owens, Todd Pinkston, Freddie Mitchell, and Greg Lewis. Your tight ends, Chad Lewis and L.J. Smith. On the offensive line, your starters were Trey Thomas, Artis Hicks, Hank Fraley, Jermaine Mayberry, and John Runyon. Your edge rushers, Javon Curse, Derek Burgess, Hugh Douglas, and Jerome McDougal. Defensive tackles, Corey Simon. He was a really good player. Hollis Thomas, Paul Grasmanis, and Darwin Walker. Linebackers, Jeremiah Trotter, Mark Simino, Dahani Jones, Ike Reese, and Nate Wayne. Your cornerbacks, Lito Shepard, Sheldon Brown, Quentin Michael, and Roderick Hood. And at safety, of course, Weapon X, Brian Dawkins, Michael Lewis, and J.R. Reed. That's a great roster. It's such a good roster. I mean, it really is. It's loaded up. We'll talk about the Super Bowl when we get to it, but that is a roster that really probably should have won the Super Bowl that season. Now, the Patriots were the defending Super Bowl champs coming into 2004. It was their second win in 3 years. They beat the Panthers in the Super Bowl earlier that year. Eli Manning was selected number 1 overall in the draft by the San Diego Chargers, and he was then traded to the Giants for Phillip Rivers, who was taken number 4 overall by the Giants with some other draft picks tossed around. And then the other thing of note, the TO rule was instituted in the NFL. This came around due to several incidents during the previous year where officials were now authorized to penalize excessive celebrations. They had a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that would be marked off from the spot at the end of the previous play or after a score on the ensuing kickoff if players involved their teammates in their celebrations. If the infraction is ruled flagrant by the officials, the player could be ejected, and many people were calling that the TO rule. Essentially, because of the Star incident in Dallas, they're really trying to cut down on fights after celebrations and some of the more elaborate celebrations that were going on around the NFL. I don't really think we worry about that as much anymore, but with TO, that was known as the TO rule. All right, let's jump in. Week 1 of the 2004 Eagles season, and the Birds handled the putrid New York Giants and their new quarterback 31-17. Owens' monster debut as the Eagles blew the doors off of the Giants. I was at this game. I remember sitting on the 20-yard line, the opponent's 20-yard line side. Got a great view of a couple of these Terrell Owens touchdown catches. The Giants did take an early 7-0 lead, but McNabb responded by marching down the field and finding Owens for this 20-yard score in a tight window.
2nd and 9 on the 20. After the timeout, pump fake by Donovan McNabb into the end zone. Caught for the touchdown by T.O. Already paid dividends. And ready for the World Bodybuilding Championships after the 20-yard catch.
Well, that's why he is such a physical presence on the outside. He is so big.
Owens would score his second touchdown in the game a few minutes later to make it 14-7. The Birds held a 24-10 lead at halftime after an L.J. Smith touchdown and a field goal for each team. And then in the third quarter, the Eagles put the game away on this fade pattern to the back of the end zone to Owens once again.
And here is the bootleg and wide open in the end zone. Touchdown, Terrell Owens. And that's 3 for T.O. in the opening game. What more could the Eagle fans ask?
And no, we could not have asked for more. On the day, T.O. caught 8 balls for 68 yards, 3 of them for touchdowns, as Brian Westbrook ran for a career-high 119 yards on 17 carries. He also hauled in 42 yards receiving. Again, the first time Westbrook was ever the feature back, and he certainly made the most of it. Donovan McNabb had a great game in the season opener. He was 26 for 36 for 330 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a 137.5 passer rating. That is what having a guy like Terrell Owens throwing you the foot to catch the football, that target, that's what that can do for you. And when I tell you how electric the place was with Owens doing what he was doing, I've never experienced anything like it. you really felt like there's no one who's going to stop this. There's no one who can stop this. To come out and score 3 touchdowns in your first game in an Eagles uniform, he said, "Am I the missing link? We'll soon see." We soon saw. We saw soon. Saw we soon. I'm going to try and rearrange it all. Anyway, it was a master class in what it means to have a true number 1 wide receiver on the outside. Someone who's just bigger and stronger and more athletic than the guys who are covering him. The Eagles, Donovan McNabb in particular, had never had a player like this. And it became so obvious the impact that Owens had on that team right from the jump against the Giants. Kurt Warner got the start for New York. He was relieved by the rookie Manning in the fourth quarter, and there was one play late in the fourth quarter where he was rolling to his right, trying to find somebody downfield, and he got absolutely obliterated by a defender. I don't remember who it was, but I wasn't sure that Eli Manning's career would ever actually begin after that. It was a complete decleating and a totally illegal hit nowadays. There's no, you could get a player kicked out of the game for the way Eli Manning got hit 20 years ago, but Eli Manning's credit, got back up and he played the rest of his career. So good for Eli. Eagles defenders did sack Giants quarterbacks 5 times on the day, and it was the Eagles' first opening day win in 4 years. So the Eagles start off the season 1-0 with a 31-17 win over the Giants. Moving on to week 2. The Eagles taking on Randy Moss. T.O. versus Randy Moss, perhaps the 2 best wide receivers in the game in prime time. Monday Night Football with Al Michaels and John Madden back when it was still on ABC. It does not get much better than this. The theater in this game. What a way to start off the first couple of weeks of the season, and the Eagles win this one 27-16. Surprisingly, neither Owens nor Moss dominated in this game. It was kind of a defensive struggle for the first half as the Eagles took a 10-6 lead into halftime with an L.J. Smith touchdown catch from McNabb and an Akers field goal. Morton Anderson kicked 2 field goals for the Vikings, but it could have been so much different. The Vikings really should have gone into the locker room with the lead, because at the end of the first half, the Vikings had 1st and goal on the Eagles 1, with the Eagles leading 10-6. But as happens in all championship seasons, when some fortuitous bounces went their way, the Eagles took advantage of it. Culpepper tried to run the ball in from the 1, and then this happened.
1st and goal from the 1-yard line. Fake to Smith again. Culpepper avoids the sack. Dante's going to run it in, and he fumbles at the goal line. The question is, did he get in with possession? He was very close to getting in. Let's see who recovers it. Felly has it. It's challengeable. If Tice wants to challenge the call, he can. Take a look. Did he get across? Did he get to the goal line with possession?
It's where the ball is. Does the ball cross the goal line?
That was a huge momentum-changing play, and it came within inches of crossing the goal line. You almost really, the Vikings should have been up 13-6 going into halftime. And with under 12 minutes left in the third quarter, McNabb put on one of his Houdini acts in the backfield, dodging and dipping and weaving away from defenders, avoiding the sack, and then finally running downfield, breaking out of the backfield for a long 20-yard touchdown run.
McNabb running inside the 10 to the outside. Touchdown as he prances in. And the key block was by Reno Mahe.
That made the score 17-9. And in the fourth quarter, Owens and McNabb finally hooked up for a big play that essentially iced the game.
Now McNabb is going deep, and it is caught for a touchdown. Terrell Owens. Slam dunk over the crossbar. He beats Winfield. Moss can only look on in agony, and Philadelphia has a 2-touchdown lead.
But upon further review, but they didn't review this play, the touchdown probably should not have counted, as Owens was bobbling the ball when his knee touched the ground before he reached the end zone.
Look at this. When your knee hits the ground, the play is over. See his knee there? He doesn't have possession of the ball there. Then his knee comes up. He regains possession as the tip of the ball is on the ground, and he is rolling around close to being out of bounds.
I don't know that he ever had possession out.
Nevertheless, the Eagles got a lot of bounces, a lot of good fortune in this game. They led 24-9, and Randy Moss scored on a 4-yard touchdown from Culpepper with 3:32 left to make it 24-16. But the Eagles then drove the ball downfield late, got a David Akers field goal to ice it and win 27-16. On the night, Moss out-caught Owens. Moss had 8 catches, but only for 69 yards. He was not a deep threat in this game, as the Eagles really held him in check, but Minnesota's defense held Terrell Owens in check. 4 catches for 79 yards, although he did have that long touchdown. McNabb, 19 for 28 for 245 yards and 2 passing touchdowns, 45 yards rushing on the day. All right, 2 weeks in, the Eagles are 2-0, and they look as good as we thought they might look, which takes us to week 3, as the Eagles travel on the road for their first road game of the season, obviously, in Detroit, taking on the Lions, and the Eagles cruised in this one 30-13. It was the Eagles' first road game of the year, but it didn't matter. The Lions had quarterback Joey Harrington on the field for them. And you can guess how that went. Yes, the Lions were absolutely overmatched in this game. The Eagles jumped out to a 21-0 lead thanks to a 1-yard McNabb touchdown run that was set up by a 48-yard bomb to Freddie Mitchell. And there was a 1-yard touchdown catch from backup tight end Mike Bartram that gave the Eagles their third score of the game. This Owens 29-yard score from number 5 was the second touchdown that gave the Eagles a 14-0 lead.
The hottest team in the NFC at 2-0, winning both their games by 10 or more points, leading for 7 and going for more into the end zone, and that pass is caught for the touchdown by Terrell Owens, and he has number 5.
Tell you, we talked at the top, what is different about this Philadelphia Eagle team, and we talked about the play at Donovan McNabb, but let's not forget about Brad Childress and Andy Reid and what they are doing calling plays. They are much more aggressive. Fernando Bryant, he's sitting on that route. He's waiting. They're not going to try and run a guy by me right now, and he doesn't get turned, and Terrell Owens goes right by him.
One thing I should note about the Lions game, Javon Curse, the other big free agent signing, had been quiet up to that point. No sacks in his first 2 games, just 3 tackles in the first game, 2 tackles in the second game, but he had a big day against the Lions. 3 sacks in the game against Detroit. He also had 4 solo tackles, 2 tackles for loss in the backfield, and 1 forced fumble. So it was quite an outing for Javon Curse. It was the only time in the first 4 games he had any sacks, but 3 sacks for Javon Curse in that first game. Curse, I got to say, kind of had a disappointing season in 2004. Only 7.5 sacks from a guy who was called the Freak. Javon Curse, previous to that, obviously coming from the Tennessee Titans, signs the big money deal because he had been a big sack guy. In 2003, he had 9.5 sacks. In 2002, was hurt and had only 2 sacks. But before that, 10 sacks in 2001, 11.5 sacks in 2000, 14.5 sacks as the AP Defensive Rookie of the Year in 1999. He comes to Philadelphia and in his first season has 7.5 sacks. He would play 3 more seasons with the Eagles. You kind of forget about that, 05, 06, and 07. But 7.5 sacks, he had that in 2005 as well. Those would match his career highs with Philadelphia. But a monster game against the Detroit Lions in the 3rd week of the season. Not a lot else to talk about really here in this third game. The Eagles really just kind of ran up the score. Akers had 3 field goals in the second half. Roy Williams, who is a really talented young Lions receiver at the time, scored 2 times in this game, but the Eagles won comfortably 30-13. Owens had 107 yards receiving on the day. McNabb tossed 356 yards passing. Owens now on the season has 5 touchdowns in 3 games. And now week 4, This was another game that I went to. We went to Chicago, the Windy City, for a game against the Chicago Bears. It was exceedingly windy in Week 4 in this matchup against the Bears, but the Eagles weren't able to get many balls in the end zone, but a lot of field goals in this, and the Eagles defense held the Bears down for a 19-9 win. It was kind of a slog. It was kind of an ugly game. David Akers was a very busy man that day. The Eagles scored only one touchdown, but it was, as you may have guessed by now, to Terrell Owens.
First down at the 11-yard line. McNabb's pass, and it is caught by Terrell Owens for the touchdown, doing a few sit-ups after the catch. His 6th touchdown reception of the year. And the Eagles open up a 12-0 lead, taking advantage of that turnover, the muff on the punt.
He sure knows how to make friends on the road, doesn't he?
Get the fans on your side, right?
He did it with the Lions last week. They all loved him after his touchdown catches.
You know,
the same thing going in Chicago.
They talk about taking the crowd out of the game. He gets the crowd back in the game.
That's 6 touchdown catches on the year for T.O. Owens caught 8 balls on the day for 110 yards. It was a big day on the ground for Brian Westbrook. He ran for 119 yards on a career-high 23 carries with 63 yards receiving on 9 catches. He had over 180 total yards of offense. Now, David Akers did miss a couple of field goals. Otherwise, the score might have been a little bit higher. And it was frustrating to watch the Eagles offense fail to be able to score touchdowns. But the Bears were just never really in this game. They were never really a threat. It was early October. And in Chicago, early October is like mid-November in the Northeast. It was pretty darn cold and windy, but I remember that I have fond memories of this game because I went with my father and my brother, which we had never really done that before. We'd never gone on the road to go see an Eagles game. We did it through one of those travel groups where we stayed in a hotel downtown, went to the game on that Sunday, and it was a blast. It was a blast going with my dad and with my brother, just going around Chicago. I had never been to Chicago before, so it was a lot of fun exploring the city a little bit and watching an Eagles win with a bunch of other crazed Eagles fans. It was a big Eagles crowd. The Bears at this point were not terribly good, and yeah, so it was a nice easy win for the Eagles. Really 4 easy wins in a row to start off the season, and that is really the expectations that we had for this Eagles team with Terrell Owens were being met. Everything we imagined that this Eagles team could be, they were going about being that team. And that was one of the most encouraging things from those first 4 weeks. It was exactly what we in our minds had been saying for years would happen if Andy Reid and the offense had gone out and gotten themselves a stud wide receiver. But here in 2004, they finally did so, and we were watching the fruits of that. All right, so next week, we're going to look at the second 4 games of the Eagles 2004 season. At this point, the Eagles hit their Week 5 bye week, holding the best record in the NFC, an undefeated 4-0 record with all 4 wins, again, being pretty dang comfortable. It was their best start since 1993. So next week on Episode 3, we'll take a look at the next 4 games on the schedule, which did include their one and only real loss of the season and showed maybe the very first hints at a crack in the relationship between Terrell Owens and his quarterback. So join me for Episode 2 of Eagles Memories next week. In the meantime, I would encourage all of you, if you have a friend, if you know somebody who misses BGN Radio, who misses the Bleeding Green Nation podcast network, show them the Eagles Pin Pull Network. Send them over to the Eagles Pin Pull Network, and that's where you can find on the Shane page the terrific film breakdown podcast that Shane Page and that Shane Half and Johnny Page do. We also have Birds of the Round Table, which is another terrific podcast, and of course Eagles Memories here will potentially be adding more shows, and I will have Eye on the Enemy coming at you here again as the summer rolls along, and we want to kind of be taking a look around the NFL. We'll get into some more current modern day Eagles stuff with me as the season rolls along, but thought it would be a fun way to spend this kind of dead period in the NFL during these summer months, taking a look back at one of the great Eagles seasons in franchise history 20 years ago, the 2004 Eagles season. Next week, we'll take a look at games numbers 5 through 8. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week right here on Eagles Memories.